Thank you very much,
And welcome.
Tom. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. And after all this suspense, it would be nice to come up and say, sorry, I don't have anything to say. And just go. Well, after all these great speakers, it's quite challenging for me to come up and say something that will interest you enough. And they went very much and very well over all the various descriptions about the regions and analyzing what was happening in general in various countries. So what I'll do, I'll stick to Libya, and I will try to make a little analysis and get more on some few policy points to discuss. But just one note. As Tom said, I live in Europe and the Middle East, so I'm sort of, I don't want to say biased, but highly influenced by the perceptions that in Europe we have about what is happening. And there were 2 points where those were mainly and mostly discussed or taken by the press and the political actors that I didn't see as evidenced as much here. The first thing is that what we tend to emphasize is the fact that finally, after many years of farce, of joking about it, or the Arab press, the Arab place, the Arab street, the Arab square has come up into the picture. People have taken in their hands, for whatever reasons there were, the decision to revolt against regimes, to rebel, something we have been accustomed to see in other parts of the world and were sure that did not exist in Europe, in the Middle East. So that was one of the first things that were pointed out. And second, regarding the U.S. foreign policy. Well, I agree completely with Barak that none of us, or the Arabs, went to the streets because the President Obama told them to do. But the perception was that for the first time it has been changed, at least apparently, but I don't know how much correct it is, and you know more than I do about that. The impression is that for the first time the old saying that it is a son of a bitch, but it is our son of a bitch has been changed, and the United States will not stand by a dictator the moment that he is attacked or contested or revolted by his own people. That the policy would be switched the moment the good governance will not be a tool anymore. And so that is probably one of the reasons that in Europe they think that there is this factor of imitation between one country and the other, that it's like let go, there won't be much reaction against it. These are just two observations. The debate on Libya has been also focused on, until very recently, on the why it has happened, what were the genesis of this revolt, and was it natural, was it spontaneous, was it guided, was it a fruit of somebody else's intermingling within domestic affairs? It has been really talked a lot about it, and a journal of articles have been written about strange connections here and there. But I would like to shy away from that and get directly into what is happening today, what's the situation now, because I think that it is getting bad, and the situation on the ground is providing a stalemate, and it is important that we find a way out, or propose a way out that does not imply the complete destruction of the country, as it seems for many people who talk to almost an inevitable trend. The choice has been made to go to war, and that is the only possible solution. What is happening is that we have the insurgents, the rebels, the revolt, however you want to call the patriots, however you want to call them, mainly concentrated in Cyrenaica, enthusiastic, mostly young people and professionals and so on, supported by this international coalition led with a lot of enthusiasm by France and England, with much less enthusiasm followed by other actors such as the United States, and dragging behind is the government of Italy, who has no clue about what's going on in its former colony and in its most important country for its foreign export, and it's vaguely hanging around asking what to do and what not to do. This support goes on with the furnishing of weapons, of technology, now more of on instructors. We know that there have been many more before, but officially they are just coming in right now. Bombing are happening, raids are occurring not only on the coastal cities but also on the interior. We have reports of bombing even down south to Sebha and other cities. the situation is such that, nevertheless, and at this point, it seems to be clear that, as it is, the forces are, with this current support of the West, the Transitional Council of Benghazi and his troops and his volunteers are capable of holding on the part of Cyrenaica, not much more than that. These troops are undisciplined, poorly trained, disorganized. They control less than a third of the territory, much less so of its resources. There is an incredible level of rivalries within its self-appointed members of the council. There is fighting. Haftar left, went. Nobody knows really who controls the troop, and so on. The situation in Tripolitania is even more delicate than that. Strangely as it is, the army has held its grounds. The soldiers are fighting, the officers are not defecting to a large part. The much vaunted part of mercenaries, they do constitute a part of these troops, but a minimal part. Gaddafi has shown that he has a minimal but a certain number of consensus around his government, and at least in the region. He has kept control. That's something that went overlooked. That he has kept control for the southern part. The Fezzan is still largely in his hands. The troops of Colonel Himali are intact, are there. Nobody knows what to do. They seem to be loyal to the government, but they're still there, untouched. This tactically means that Gaddafi has a way out down south from where money, weapons, and mercenaries can keep on coming. Therefore, it means that it's almost meaningless, the barrier on the northern part of the country, the embargo, that is considered to be also an important aspect. The tribes of what we mean by tribes in Libya, especially in Tripolitania, and the vast majority of the citizens of Tripolitania are beginning, while not supportive, and this has to be emphasized, of the regime by no means. The vox populi is, if I have to trade Gaddafi for his butler, who's a member of who's a Cyrenaica, to come over here and rule me, that is not acceptable. And there is the reorganization of guerrilla unity. There is a fragmentation in gangs and stuff that is going on in Tripolitania that is not an indication of positive outcome. There is also this belief, which is widely expressed. Okay, I understand, and we all know it, that in the Middle East the idea of conspiracy theory is big. We are all American trained and we tend to shy away from this. But when something is believed very much, it becomes a political factor. So we have to take it into consideration. In Tripolitania, there is the strongly held belief that the revolt were spontaneous, but they triggered an attempted coup d'etat that was organized month and month before by France, by betrayed traitors within the regime. And so the idea is that is a Cyrenaican affair. That's something that happened there. They want to overturn the balance of power. We are not going to accept it. And that is a widely held belief against which you encounter a difficulty in talking. Some other people say that there is the perception within the entourage of Gaddafi, within his inner circle, that he could hold, that the war can be won, that there is no way that the West will intervene militarily in such an effective way to get to Tripoli and conquer the country. This, I don't think it's true. The pressure, there is a heavy pressure within the same circles, and there is the realization that the era is finished, that the regime is over, that there has to be a way out that has to be found and or created or proposed. The fact that the troops are holding their grounds doesn't mean much, and doesn't mean much as well the rhetoric with which the regime is aggressively presenting itself in the press. That has always been the case, and it's a very typical attitude of that regime and that personalities. You just shoot very high, and then on the ground you act differently. Therefore, I don't think that the dominant perception within the regime is that of a victory. It's that there is a stalemate and we can hold the ground until something happens. What happens, they're not working for anything to happen. They're waiting for something to happen from the outside. Another point that should be made is that rebus sic stantibus, being this a situation on the ground, I do not think that even a victory, by whatever means, Gaddafi is killed and the regime implodes and the people from the Transitional Council of Benghazi are parachuted by the French into Tripoli and enter Tripoli victorious, that will mean the unification of Libya, that will mean a solution to the case, that will mean peace, and that will mean reconstruction. I actually believe that will mean the opposite. The scenario that I play in my mind and in that of my colleagues when we think about it is the Iraqi scenario, where you enter in with the belief that you remove Saddam Hussein, disband the army, and bring democracy and everybody will be happy. Mutatis mutandis. The two cases are different, I know, but the same thing can happen to Libya. You kill Gaddafi, kick it out, everybody will be happy, the army goes home, and new administration can be set, and the country will be unified, and everything will go back to shape. I don't think that will happen. I'm actually highly pessimistic, either in the case of the stalemate or in the case of a victory of a sudden victory of the Benghazi Council would solve anything. The other possibility, that is a victory of Gaddafi or a holding out, I don't even take it into consideration. There is, in my opinion, absolutely no way that the regime can survive. It has exhausted its, if it ever had a reason, it has been definitely exhausted. Therefore, entering into the realm of policy prescriptions, I do not think as well, and I do not have any information regarding the fact that a serious attempt to negotiating or offering a negotiated way out for Gaddafi has been attempted. The African Union was not done properly, and it was not intended to happen in that direction. One has to understand the inner workings of this regime. One has to understand the dynamics of the elite group, and the dynamics of Gaddafi as a man. Never believed that Gaddafi was crazy, never believed that he was out of touch with reality. Gaddafi is like any other dictator. He wants to live, and he doesn't want to die as he says he wants to die, and that's my personal belief. A negotiated offer should be made that would save his face, but at the same time would prevent him from having any role in the future of Libya. That can only be done, and that is a role that I think only the United States can play. A negotiated message that would convince him to leave power, to remain in Libya, should be offered him away. In total isolation, in Sirte, in Sebha, in wherever the debate is, but he has to remain in the country, because the most important thing is that he abdicates. Gaddafi has to leave his role, and somebody has, and this is a transitional situation, which is fundamental, that somebody takes the power on his behalf in Libya. A figure that is less tainted than he is, that's not too much into the inner dealings of the regime, but it could hold the ground, because the most important thing is that the army gets reassured, that there will be somebody that will take the administration in power, that will maintain the structure, whatever structure there are, that will maintain the regularity of the army. There will somebody say guaranteeing the continuation for a few days or a few weeks or a few months, in order to start then negotiations with the Transitional Council of Benghazi. At this point, history comes to help, because Libya was made by the United Nations many, many years ago. And I think that there is a role for the United Nations at that point to intervene with a commission like the one Adrian Pelt headed, or one Adrian Pelt organized in the end of the 40s and the early 50s, that led to the independence of Libya. There should be a commission that should be able to select, and the word is select, a number of representative Libyans from the whole regions. People that have not been part of the regime, but that have, because of their family, because of their tribal, because of their charisma, because of their role in society, enough to be able to represent the whole of the Libyan state, the whole of the Libyan nation, and therefore form a commission that will be in charge to draft a constitution. A transitional government would be in place. This transitional government would run and rule for the ordinary administration, which needs to be taken care of. And All of this under the protection of the United Nations. The new constitution will be drafted, and then a certain period of time will be left for elections. Now, all of this seems to be elaborate. I understand that this might be a difficult plan, this might be complicated in many aspects, but as we all try to say, is that it's the only alternative. It's for diplomacy to play a role instead of war. What we see as a tragedy that is going to happen is the complete destruction of what is left of Libya, and I think that if a negotiated way out is offered to the regime, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a few weeks, if not months, of heavy bombing, of fighting, of stalemate, of breaking down of the civil order in most parts of Tripolitania. We're going to see what is a civil war, de facto, happening and going on. One last point. Anytime I speak about this, there is a reaction which is like, it's not in the national interest of the United States to do that. And second, the idea of leaving Gaddafi in Libya is alien to most of the diplomats in charge, or to most of the politicians that talk about it. I agree that at this point it's not a vital interest of the United States. But at the same time, why I agree also that there is no Al-Qaeda in Libya. That is a stupid thing to say that the revolt have Al-Qaeda behind it or the Islamists behind it. I agree that there is nothing like that. There are very few and scattered for this reason. But it doesn't mean that an anarchic system, a civil war situation, a gang and the criminal racketeering domination of parts of the country will not lead to the realization of sanctuaries, to the realization of training camps for terrorists or for Islamic organizations. The continuation of the war will mean also the impossibility to maintain the great man-made river structure, which means very little water coming to the coastal cities, which means a water problem very quickly for over 2 or 3 million people. Food is already lacking in Tripolitania. There is nothing like that. There are riots in the gas stations. There are empty shelves in the supermarket and in the stores. It is beginning to become a problem. All of this to say that once you're going to have this kind of collapse or this kind of picture, you're going to have a huge humanitarian crisis right in the middle of the Mediterranean. And if Tunisia, Egypt, Italy, France and company are already complaining about the entering of a group of immigrants of 15, 20,000 Tunisians, I wonder what will happen when they're going to have 100,000 or 200,000 Libyans starving, walking into Tunisia or walking into Egypt, if that's the picture is going to happen. That will then become a vital interest of the Western, at least, if not of the United States. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karim. I see about half a dozen people in the audience who could have been panelists today.